The tradition started long before we realized it was a tradition. It began with casual dinners in cramped college apartments, where mismatched chairs surrounded second-hand tables, and the laughter outshone the poor lighting. The group had formed almost effortlessly. Adam and Peter were roommates. Jennifer and Rebecca bonded over endless study sessions, and Greg's baseball ambitions had naturally drawn a crowd of admirers and critics alike. Helen had been the glue, a quiet force of reason and warmth, making sure every gathering felt like home. When Carmen and I met years later, I was folded into the mix as though I had always belonged, though the undercurrent of shared history between them was something I would never fully grasp. As years passed, our lives grew outward, but our circle remained unbroken. Weddings, children, new jobs, losses. Each milestone was met with a gathering, a meal, a toast to how life never quite unfolded as expected, but was beautiful all the same. The college apartments gave way to suburban homes, where backyards replaced balconies, and the sound of children's laughter filled the spaces once occupied by late-night debates and music that played too loud. Adam became the first to host with his ever-growing grill collection, a passion that seemed ironic given his aversion to the very food his businesses sold. Peter and Helen's house had always been the most welcoming, their door open in a way that made it impossible to feel like a guest. That was just how it was, until it wasn't. Helen's illness was the first real fracture. For all our years together, we had no blueprint for loss. She faded too quickly, and when she was gone, something in Peter shifted, as though he had been left in a world slightly out of sync. We tried to fill the space she left behind. Extra invitations, longer conversations, making sure he never felt alone. But grief does not resolve itself in group efforts. It lingers, carving quiet absences where laughter once lived. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The warm southern Colorado air set the perfect backdrop for another Saturday night with close friends, a tradition we kept for years. Adam and Jennifer hosted that evening. Adam, a health nut, owned several fast food franchises, but never ate the food himself. He saw it purely as an investment. Jennifer worked as a school receptionist just to stay busy. Their kids, Holly and Matthew, were 15 and 13. Greg had once dreamed of a professional baseball career until a knee injury changed his path. Instead, he built a career in sporting goods, eventually becoming vice president. That's where he met Rebecca, who worked in accounting. They had a 14-year-old daughter, Tasha. Peter ran a successful chain of car dealerships. His wife, Helen, had been a homemaker until she passed away from cancer a year ago at just 41. Their daughter, Olivia, was 21 and in college. Then there was me, Brian. I worked as a project manager for a large contracting firm. My wife, Carmen, was a stay-at-home mom, and our daughter, Emma, had recently joined Olivia at university. We'd all known each other for years. I was the only one who hadn't met the group in college. They had been friends since university, while I met Carmen and, by extension, them later. Somehow we'd all stayed in the same area and remained close. That evening, Carmen sat at the patio table, deep in conversation with Peter. Adam and Greg manned the grill while Jennifer and Rebecca prepped sides inside. It felt like every other gathering, except for the glances Carmen and Peter exchanged. I didn't think much of it then. Looking back, that moment changed everything. The next morning started like any other. Carmen and I had a habit of showering together on weekends. Afterward, I dressed and headed to the garage to work on my '65 Chevy Malibu SS Coupe, a restoration project I'd been working on for 2 years. Just as I was about to leave, Carmen stopped me. "Honey, before you go, I need to talk to you." We sat at the kitchen table. She hesitated before saying, "Peter told me last night he's ready to start dating again." I nodded. "That's great. He deserves to be happy." "There's someone he's interested in," she said. "Someone he's had feelings for a long time." I frowned. "Someone we know." She looked away. "Brian, it's me." Silence filled the room. "What do you mean it's you?" My voice was calm but sharp. "Peter wants to be with me," she admitted. I chuckled, assuming she was joking. "Well, you're beautiful and smart. Too bad you're unavailable." She didn't smile. That's when it hit me. "Oh," my voice dropped. "This conversation isn't about Peter's feelings. It's about yours." I swallowed hard. "Are you asking for a divorce?" Her eyes widened. "No, Brian. I don't want a divorce. I want to stay married to you for the rest of my life." "Then what the hell is this?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Just listen to me," she pleaded. I braced myself. Whatever she was about to say, I knew I wouldn't like it. She took a deep breath. "Brian, you know everyone in our group met in college, except you." I nodded. "I met Peter in an English class. We started dating. We were in love. We even talked about marriage." A pit formed in my stomach. "Then one night, we drank too much. Peter and Helen slept together." I stiffened. "What?" "They swore it was a mistake. I forgave them, but a few months later, Helen found out she was pregnant with Olivia." My jaw clenched. Peter did what he thought was right and married Helen. I was devastated, but I moved on. Then I met you. You and I fell in love. And over time, Peter and Helen did too. I exhaled sharply. "And you all decided to keep this from me." She nodded. "We thought if you knew, it would ruin your friendship with Peter." I scoffed. "So if Helen hadn't died, I would have never known." Her silence said it all. I shook my head. "So why tell me now?" She turned to the window, staring outside. And finally she spoke. "I was wondering how you'd feel about sharing me with him." Time froze. I stood so fast, my chair toppled over. "Share you?" My voice was incredulous. "Are you having an affair?" "No, Brian. Not really, please. Let me explain." I was shaking with rage. "You know what, Carmen? I need to leave before I say something I regret." I grabbed my keys and stormed out, my mind racing. She didn't want a divorce, but she wanted me to share her with another man. Was I supposed to sit back and let them rekindle their love? No, that wasn't something I could ever accept. Carmen was either mine or not mine at all. Before I even realized it, I found myself outside Peter's apartment. His Mercedes sat in front. Was this his idea, or had Carmen come up with it on her own? I needed answers. I knew Brian would never agree. Deep down, I had hoped, but expecting him to be okay with me spending time with Peter was unrealistic, and I was right. This morning, I made sure he knew I loved him no matter what. For a brief moment, everything felt normal. But inside, I was torn. I had loved Peter first, long before Brian, and that love never completely faded. Maybe if we had lost touch it would have disappeared, but we hadn't. Seeing him all these years kept the spark alive. And last night, I finally realized he felt the same. Jennifer, Rebecca, and I had been pushing Peter to start dating again. He was still young, only 42, and we didn't want him to be alone forever. We gave him time to grieve, then nudged him forward. We never expected him to remarry right away, just to try. At first, he resisted, not because he wasn't ready, but because he said he could never love anyone as much as he had loved Helen. We told him love didn't have to be the same, just enough. Then last night at the barbecue, he admitted the truth. He wasn't holding back because he couldn't love again. He was holding back because he already loved someone, had loved her for over 20 years. Me. He confessed that even more than Helen, I had always been the one. Marrying her was the right thing to do, but every moment he saw me with Brian had been torture. I admitted I still loved him too, but I also loved Brian, and I refused to hurt him. At first, I thought Peter was asking me to have an affair, but I wasn't that kind of woman. I wouldn't sneak around behind Brian's back. That wasn't what Peter wanted. He asked if I was truly happy in my marriage. I told him I was. But he looked at me, eyes full of longing, and said he wanted us to be together. Forever. Not a fling, not an affair, but a life. He wanted me to leave Brian to start over, to finally have the future we once imagined. I told him I couldn't do that. Yet the idea of being with him without giving up my marriage took root in my mind. I had heard stories, men with 2 families in different cities, lying to both, pretending work kept them away. They loved both women, cared for both families. They just couldn't choose. I had never understood it. But now it made sense. Still, it wouldn't work for me. I didn't have a job. I had no excuse to leave for long periods. The only way to make it work was to be honest. Completely honest. I suggested the idea to Peter. He wasn't thrilled about a part-time arrangement, but he understood I was trying. He said Brian would never agree. He was probably right. What kind of man would share his wife? Devotion separates us from animals. What man could truly love a woman and still let another man have her? It meant I had to choose. Could I leave Brian, the man who had been my husband for 20 years, who knew my dreams, my fears, my soul? Could I give that up for Peter, the man I had once loved, still loved, but had never built a life with? But something had always been missing. When Peter and I were together, we fit. We had dreams, plans, a future. But when Helen got pregnant, everything changed. He married her, and I had to let go. I convinced myself I had moved on. But had I? Now, I had a chance to reclaim that lost dream. Helen was gone. Peter still wanted me. Could I walk away from the one thing I had longed for all these years? I honestly didn't know. By the time I got home, it was nearly dinner. I had spent the day driving, trying to clear my head. I stopped for lunch but avoided Adam's restaurants, as if boycotting them would make a point. Carmen was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. When she saw me, she tried to hug me, but I stopped her. Brian, not until you tell me exactly what you want. I cut her off. No more hints, no more games. Just say it. She hesitated, then nodded. It's not a divorce, or an affair. Then what? She took a deep breath. I love you. I always have. But I also love Peter. I loved him before you. And I never stopped. I buried those feelings for 20 years because we were both married, and I was faithful. But before I met you, I saw my future with him. And when that was taken away, I lost a part of myself. My jaw clenched. Get to the point. She swallowed. I want to live with Peter, part-time. The rest of the time, I'd be with you. The words hit like a punch. For a moment, I just stared at her. This was worse than anything I had imagined. An affair would have been painful, but at least she would know it was wrong. This was deliberate. She wanted to divide her life, like some kind of arrangement, like shared custody. So what? I finally said, my voice rough. 1 week with him, 1 week with me. Something like that, she admitted. The anger drained from me, replaced by something worse. Pain. I could see it on her face. She knew exactly what she was doing to me. Of course, she added quickly, I'd want to spend most of my time with you, as if that was supposed to comfort me. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. And when you say live as husband and wife, you mean you'd be sleeping with him too? She hesitated. Yes, that's part of love. I wanted to scream, but I just stared at her, feeling the ground vanish beneath me. I stalled, asking questions, trying to make sense of it. Where would we live? Would I stay here while you and Peter come and go? Those are details we'd figure out. And Peter is okay with this. She nodded. Yes, he's willing to share me. Of course he is, I muttered. He went from nothing to something. Why wouldn't he agree? He gets what he wants. A woman he loves with no real commitment. A companion who doesn't take up too much of his time. I'm not just a companion, Brian. Carmen snapped. He loves me. And I love him. I took a slow breath. And what if I refuse? She blinked. What do you mean? I met her gaze, my voice cold. What if I say no? What happens then? She swallowed hard. Then I guess I'd have to choose. That said it all. If she had any real intention of staying, she wouldn't have framed it as a choice. She would have said, "I'll tell Peter no." But she didn't. She was waiting for me to step aside. "Okay," I said flatly. "I'll find a place to stay tonight. A lawyer tomorrow." I packed a suitcase and walked to my truck. Carmen sat at the kitchen table staring into her coffee. She didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't even look at me. That told me everything. I was breaking over this. She wasn't. Of course not. She had Peter, the man she had always wanted, waiting for her. I climbed into my truck and drove across town to a cheap motel. That night, Peter's windshield got smashed by a rock. No suspects. I woke at 5, took a taxi home, and got to work. Carmen usually slept late, giving me time to finish putting the tires back on the Malibu. I was almost done when I heard her at the door. "Sorry if I woke you," I muttered. "I'll be out soon." "You didn't wake me," she said softly. "I can't sleep without you." I didn't look up. "You'll have to get used to it." "Would you have left without saying anything?" "Do I mean that little to you?" My jaw clenched. "You don't want me to answer that." "Brian, I don't want you to go," she pleaded. "I love you." I let out a bitter laugh. "You probably don't believe me," she continued. "But I do. I gave you the best years of my life and want to share the rest. But I love him too. My life won't feel complete without him." She stepped closer. "We don't have to end. This could be our new normal." "New normal," I repeated, something inside me snapping. "You must think you're really special," I said, voice sharp, that after 20 years, I'd be fine settling for part-time. Two men waiting for whatever scraps you decide to throw our way. That must be one hell of an ego boost. Her face fell. "You don't have to be cruel." "Why not?" "You are." She shook her head. "I'm just trying to find a way to make this work." I laughed, hollow. "Don't worry about it," I said coldly. "We'll be divorced soon. Then you can be with the man you always really wanted." Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. What kind of man loses his wife without doing anything wrong? The answer was simple. I wasn't enough, and I lost her. "Please don't say that." Carmen's voice wavered. "I never thought that about you." I met her gaze, unreadable. "I married you to be happy with you for the rest of my life. You weren't some placeholder." "Okay, I hope you believe that," I muttered. "It sure doesn't feel like it." "Of course it matters, Brian," she insisted. "You matter. I never meant to hurt you. This just happened." "Yeah. Well, that'll be real comforting when I'm lying in an empty bed while you're with my so-called friend." I took a slow breath. You can both go to hell. That day, I moved through work like a sleepwalker. At lunch, I made an appointment with a lawyer. After work, I split our funds. It wasn't fair. I wasn't leaving. She was. But I knew how it would play out. I just hoped to avoid alimony. That evening, I drove home to grab a few more things. I pressed the garage door opener without thinking. As it lifted, I saw it. A familiar Mercedes parked where my Malibu used to be. It didn't take long. I gripped the steering wheel, vision blurring, not with tears but rage. Then the kitchen door opened. Carmen stepped into the garage and froze. She hadn't expected me. Our eyes met briefly before I threw the truck in reverse and drove away. A few minutes later, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. "Brian, I'm so sorry you saw that. I wasn't expecting you tonight." I felt lonely and sad. Bringing him here was bad manners, especially so soon. "I didn't realize it until I saw your face. I'm really sorry. It won't happen again." Damn it. She still thought I might consider her offer. She assumed my love for her would force me to compromise. Maybe she thought I'd see the benefits. Like what? More time to work on my cars while she was with Peter. But I noticed I wasn't supposed to be home tonight. That was her mistake. Maybe they hadn't slept together yet. Maybe just a kiss on the couch. But it didn't matter. She had already replaced me, and she thought I'd be okay with it. She did what? Emma's voice exploded through the phone. I sighed. She asked me to share her with Uncle Peter. When I refused, she left me for him. Silence. Then, damn it, Dad, stopped calling her Mom. I frowned. What do you mean? My mom wouldn't do this. Emma snapped. Not to you. Not after 20 years. How dare she? I exhaled. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But she's still the woman who raised you. She loves you, even if she's lost her darn mind. Stop defending her, she yelled. She loved you. She was happy. What else did she need? How could she do this? I don't know, sweetheart, I admitted. But I won't beg someone to stay who doesn't want me. She was quiet for a moment, then muttered, It's like she lied for 20 years and wasted your life. I thought so too, I said. But I got you out of that deal, so it was worth it. I know, she said, voice softer. But still. I sighed. I was always an outsider to them. I wasn't part of their college group. Maybe I should have known. She sniffled. I just don't get it. Neither do I admitted. But we'll figure it out. Let me know if you need anything, she said. Me and my friends will take you out to dinner. Distract you. We both laughed. For the first time in days, I felt lighter. At least I wasn't the only one who thought this was wrong. The next day, I was having lunch when my phone rang. I sighed, expecting Carmen. But when I checked, it was Adam. Brian, how are you? That depends. How much do you know? We know everything, he admitted. Peter and Carmen told us last night. Then you know how I'm doing, I said dryly. Adam sighed. Look, we're sorry. We never meant to keep things from you. We thought it was better that you didn't know. Maybe we made the wrong choice. But back then, we were young. We figured what you didn't know wouldn't hurt you. I get it. Adam. At first, I was pissed. But honestly, I'd probably have done the same. No hard feelings. Adam hesitated. What about Emma? One day she'll get married, have kids. What then? I swallowed hard. That's a long way off, I muttered. Maybe by then, I'll tolerate them. If not, we'll figure it out. After I hung up, it hit me. My life had revolved around Carmen. My friendships started through her. It was time to change that. I sat in Greg and Rebecca's yard, fingers tapping my knee. This was our first gathering since everything changed. I hated that Brian wasn't coming. Maybe never would again. I truly believed we could talk things through and stay friends. If Helen, Peter, and I had managed it before, why not now? Jennifer and Rebecca understood. I couldn't change the past. I should have married Peter years ago, but I didn't. Was it wrong to fix that mistake now? Did it have to cost me my marriage? It didn't seem fair. Tonight felt awkward. People weren't used to seeing Peter and me as a couple, but being with him felt right. And if that wasn't proof I made the right choice, I didn't know what was. I moved into an apartment, storing the Malibu. It was inconvenient, but temporary. I tried building a social life, but it was tough. I worked with younger guys who had no interest in hanging out with their boss, so I started going out alone, hoping to meet people. Not a woman, just friends. One night, I was actually having fun. Then Carmen and Peter walked in, looking happy, like nothing had happened. No one else cared. But I did. My mood shattered. She looked as beautiful as ever, and my stomach sank. I was furious she still had that power over me. I slipped to the back of the club, hoping to escape. But Peter spotted me. Moments later, Carmen was heading my way. Why are you avoiding me, Brian? Because I don't want to talk to you. We were married for 20 years. Are we not even friends? No, Carmen. We're just exes who share a child. That's it. If you had fallen out of love, maybe I could respect that. But asking me to share you, then choosing Peter, it destroyed everything. She looked hurt. I didn't care. Besides, why do you care? You got the man you wanted. You still have our friends. I could drop dead and it wouldn't change your life. That's not true, she insisted. I still love you. I still have feelings for you. Is there a chance we'll be friends again? She asked. I let out a dry chuckle. Can history reverse itself? Then there's your answer. She looked crushed. I loved you for over 20 years, I said, voice calm. In the moment you had a chance to be with Peter, none of it mattered. I walked away. Peter opened his mouth as I passed, but the look I gave him shut him up. Maybe he thought I still loved her. And maybe I did in some way. But love didn't mean trust, and I didn't consider us friends. That night, I realized I was stuck in the past, going to the same places, trying to build something new from old memories. But it was holding me back. Time to move forward. Seeing Brian again hurt. I thought we were still friends. I only wanted to say hello. But he ran, then told me flat out we weren't friends anymore. It stung. I still loved him. If he had come back, I would have considered sharing time again, even though Peter and I were married now. But Brian never would. Back at our table, I half expected him to take a swing at Peter, but he didn't. And somehow, that made it worse. I needed a fresh start. So I found a rental in a quiet cul-de-sac, far enough from Carmen and Peter, but close enough for Emma. I set up a room for her visits, turned another into an office. The neighborhood was older, but well kept. I worried about disrupting the peace, so I left cupcakes and notes for my neighbors, introducing myself. I expected to move in alone. I had lost most of my friends in the divorce. But as soon as the truck arrived, my new neighbors showed up to help. By the end of the day, everything was unpacked. That night, I played poker with them. Turned out my house was only available because the last owner, Travis, had an affair and got his secretary pregnant. His wife left town, and he moved across the city after being shunned. As I sat in my new home, beer in hand, I realized, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. The guys usually play poker on Wednesdays, but they held a special game to welcome me. While we played, their wives did their own thing. Scrabble, book club, whatever the week called for. So what do you do, Brian? Rick asked. I'm a project manager, also licensed in plumbing and contracting, I said. Ed raised an eyebrow. We could use you. Bart explained their barter system. Ed handled investments. Bart did taxes. Rick ran gyms. And Rob got event tickets. In return, they traded skills. If you're interested, we need someone for small home repairs, Bart added. Absolutely. I agreed. I asked about the other houses. The Monroes are an older couple, Ed said. He's retired military. We include them mostly for Mrs. Ruth's cooking. And their daughter, Bart added with a smirk. Taylor, Ed said. We call her the Ice Queen. Why? I asked. You'll see. The Walkers? I asked. Been here 5 years, but keep to themselves. Rob shrugged. We played a few more hands. Anything weird I should know about you guys? I joked. Rick laughed. Nothing crazy, but we'll let you know at our monthly meeting. A voice from the other room called out. Ha, just wish it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. I was still furious at Mom, but I was glad Dad was moving on. We talked at least once a week, usually more. Mom called often, but I ignored her. She wanted my approval for marrying ex-Uncle Peter. I told her flat out, not happening. If she wanted to see me, it had to be without him. As far as I was concerned, if Peter had kept his mouth shut, my parents would still be together. After settling in, I introduced myself to the Monroes. Hi, I'm Brian. Just moved in down the street. Ruth beamed. Come in. We saw all the activity at your place. We talked. Richard was retired Navy, and they had one daughter, Taylor. They proudly showed me pictures. She's beautiful, I said. Ruth's eyes twinkled. She visits often. Not married, though. I recognized a matchmaking attempt. Yes, I'm single. Divorced about a year now. That seemed to please her. I mentioned my skills in the street's barter system, offering to help with repairs. They eagerly pointed out small issues. While fixing a faucet, I saw her. She walked in, froze, then scowled. "Who the heck are you?" she snapped. "Brian," I said. Arms crossed, she narrowed her eyes. "Make sure you clean up, and I expect an itemized bill." Her tone caught me off guard. I just nodded. Without another word, she turned and left. An ice queen indeed. Later, I overheard her with her parents. "Mom, Dad, I told you not to hire anyone." He tore apart the bathroom over a leaky faucet. "It's fine, dear," Ruth said. "He's only charging for materials." "Don't pay him until I inspect everything," she scoffed. I shook my head and went back to work. Ruth returned later, apologetic. "She's just looking out for you," I said. "She is," Ruth sighed. "Her husband cheated on her. Ever since she's been different." She smiled. "Dinner's at 6. Will you join us?" "Sure," I said. "Will Taylor be there?" Ruth chuckled. "Not tonight. Maybe next time." Maybe next time. Men sucked. Liars. Cheaters. Deceivers. My ex-husband Jimmy was all three. We met in college. I thought we were happy. I was wrong. One weekend I came home early from a volleyball tournament. I walked in on an intimate gathering. Jimmy, his boss, her daughter, his secretary. I froze. Then I grabbed my phone and took pictures. By Monday morning, I had filed for divorce. Jimmy had been cheating on me from the start, with both Margaret and her daughter Miranda. The baby Miranda had 2 years ago. His. Not an accident either. They asked him to be the father, and he agreed. As if that wasn't bad enough. Nearly all our male friends knew and covered for him. That betrayal cut even deeper. Jimmy had promised them jobs in exchange for silence. Jobs he didn't even have the power to give. When the truth came out, their wives left them too. Margaret paid me off to keep quiet, covered my divorce, relocation, and gave me a generous sum to start over. Jimmy married Miranda, got richer, and joined the same depraved circle that destroyed my life. So yeah, life wasn't fair. And now some random guy was in my parents' house, alone with them, tearing apart their bathroom. He might have been good-looking, but I knew there had to be something wrong with him. He was a man, after all, and I wasn't falling for another one. The next evening, I had dinner at Ed and Kathy's. I was looking forward to getting to know my neighbors better. Kathy was warm and kind, though not conventionally attractive, round with acne scars, and a curvy figure. But the love between her and Ed was obvious. I mentioned I had fixed the Monroe's bathroom. "So did you meet the Ice Queen?" Ed smirked. "I asked you not to call her that," Kathy sighed. Ed shrugged. "She's never been friendly." I nodded. "Yeah, I met her. She told me to clean up, not rip off her parents, and then lectured them about how I'd probably break something just to scam them." Ed grinned. "See, Ice Queen." Kathy sighed. "She's been through a lot. Calling her names doesn't help." "What happened?" I asked. "She was married, lived in Florida. 3 years ago, she divorced and moved back. Maybe she's still carrying anger from that," Kathy explained. "Or maybe she's just rude," Ed muttered. I shrugged. "Seems like a shame. She's beautiful. But the second she opened her mouth, I knew you weren't exaggerating." That weekend, Emma and her roommate Patrice came to visit. Patrice was petite, pretty in a subtle way, with long legs and a quiet confidence. We spent the day at the mall, and I bought them a few things. Emma mentioned Patrice's parents couldn't afford extras, so I didn't mind treating them. We had lunch at the food court, dinner at Olive Garden, then watched a movie at home. Patrice took the pull-out couch instead of sharing the guest bed with Emma. The next morning, I took them to brunch before they headed back. Emma, as always, tried to push me into dating again, even suggesting single grad students and professors at her university. I thanked her but declined. A week later, Bart smirked at me across the table. "Heard you had some hot young chicks at your place over the weekend, enjoying single life already." I chuckled. "Bart, don't call my daughter a chick. At least not to her face." And the other girl was her college roommate. Bart turned red. "Yeah, sorry about that." "Nothing happened. Just a visit," I said. 2 weeks later, we had dinner at the Monroes. Miss Ruth set a beautiful table, and the food was incredible. No surprise, everyone happily included them in the barter system. She liked mixing up the seating, alternating men and women to keep things social. I ended up between Kathy and Bart's wife, Jennifer, a tall, striking Latina who always wore too much makeup. She was stunning, but what mattered was her devotion to Bart. Actually, all the couples here seemed completely in love. It got me thinking about the previous owners of my house, Travis and Rachel, a once happy marriage destroyed by an affair. Part of me was disappointed Taylor wasn't there. The others didn't seem to like her, but I doubted they ever tried to know her. There was something about her that intrigued me. I couldn't explain it. Something told me there was more beneath her icy exterior. I avoided my mother's neighborhood dinners whenever possible. She adored these couples, treated them like family, but I hated being surrounded by happy marriages when mine had ended in betrayal. It wasn't them. It was just hard. I couldn't look at a man without wondering if he was a cheater. And yet, I still wanted love. A family. Kids before time ran out. I tried to move past my bitterness, but Jimmy's betrayal left deep scars. I had to admit, I felt a little sorry for Brian. We crossed paths a few times, and he seemed decent. My parents spoke highly of him, but he was divorced, which probably meant he cheated too. And I wasn't going down that road again. Once a cheater, always a cheater. I crashed at my parents' house one night after watching movies with them. The next morning, my car wouldn't start. "Mom, can I take yours? I'm going to be late for work," I called out. "Of course, dear. I'll figure it out after work." My phone rang early. "Brian, I'm sorry to bother you," Ms. Ruth said. "I wanted to catch you before you left for work." "No problem. I'm off today. What's up? You know how to fix cars, don't you?" "A little," I admitted. "More restoration than repair, but I know a few things." "Having car trouble?" "Not me. Taylor. Her car wouldn't start, so she took mine. I thought maybe you could take a look." "Do you have the keys?" "Yes, we have a spare set." "I'll check it out now." It turned out to be the alternator. I wasn't an expert mechanic, but I could fix it. A quick trip to the dealership for a replacement, and a few hours later, the car was good as new. I wasn't going to lie. I liked the idea of doing something nice for Taylor. There was something about her beyond her beauty. When she was near, I felt a spark I couldn't explain. I wondered if she felt it too. I wanted to ask her out, but she was still so closed off. Maybe this was a start. "Mom, I'm back. Thanks for the car," I said, stepping inside. I grabbed my phone, ready to call a tow truck. Mom stopped me. "That won't be necessary, dear. Your car's already fixed." I frowned. "What? It just magically started working?" She chuckled. "No, honey, Brian took care of it." I hesitated. I had been rude to him before, and yet here he was, going out of his way to help me. I stepped outside and started my car. It roared to life. I sighed, then walked 2 doors down and knocked on Brian's door. Brian opened the door, shirtless. I hesitated. He was lean, strong, effortlessly attractive. My pulse quickened before I caught myself staring. "Hey, Taylor, how was work?" he asked warmly. Thrown off by his kindness, I cleared my throat. "Fine. Mom said you fixed my car. How much do I owe you?" "You don't." I frowned. "I'd rather pay you." "It was just loose wires," he shrugged. "No trouble at all." "Still, thanks. I appreciate it." "My pleasure." Something about him, his warmth, his sincerity, made my heart flutter. Back home, Mom smirked. Brian spent all day fixing your car, cost him at least $400. He just didn't want you to feel obligated. I blinked and smiled. Marrying Peter was supposed to make me happier. It didn't. It wasn't worse, just different. Emma still spoke to me, frustrated, resentful. Olivia, not a word. She'd sent Peter a single message, never contact me again. He tried. She ignored him. Our friends acted like nothing had changed. We had our weekly barbecues, the same laughs, the same routines. And yet, if I could go back, knowing what I know now, would I still choose Peter? I wasn't sure. The guys and I went to a club. Music, drinks, no dancing. Then Rick spotted her. Isn't that the Ice Queen? He smirked. Taylor sat alone. Stunning. My heart sank. Was she on a date? A blonde joined her. Not a date, just a friend. I felt relieved. Guys kept asking her to dance. She kept saying no. Then a drunk guy got pushy. You've been on your phone all night, he snapped. This is a dance club. Taylor stayed calm. I'm here with a friend. He grabbed her wrist. I was already moving. She said no. I said, stepping in. Back off. The guy sneered. None of your business. I turned to Taylor. Would you like to dance? A slow smile spread across her face. My pleasure, Brian. We danced close, locked in a slow rhythm. You keep saving me, she murmured. You're worth saving, I said. She flinched slightly, like my words hit deep. Something passed between us, a connection I hadn't felt in years. And then we kissed. Heat surged through me. When we pulled apart, she rested her head on my shoulder. I didn't want to let her go. I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. I hadn't planned to see Brian. Yet somehow, everything led to this. Looks like you met someone, Karen teased. I blushed. It's him, the guy I told you about. Her eyes widened. No way. He's taking me home. You good? Of course, but I want details later. I grinned. See you at work. I caught up to Brian and instinctively took his hand. A spark shot through me. Sitting in Brian's truck felt like a first date. My heart raced. My hands felt warm, and every little thing he did sent a thrill through me. He opened the door, helped me in. His truck was spotless, smelling fresh. I wished it had an old bench seat so I could slide closer. As we drove, I hesitated before speaking. Thanks for dealing with that guy tonight. He was a real idiot. Brian smirked. A beautiful woman like you makes men act like fools. Did he even realize what he did to me? Can I ask you something personal? His voice was smooth, steady. I swallowed. Of course. Do you like ice cream? I blinked, then laughed. Actually, yes. Minutes later, we pulled into a Baskin-Robbins. I reached for the door handle, but he placed his hand over mine. Wait, let me. On the outside, I played it cool. Inside, I was screaming. Had I really met a man who knew how to treat a woman? And was he actually interested in me? We ate our ice cream in a quiet corner, mostly in silence, but his eyes never left mine. By the time he dropped me off, I was already thinking of tonight as our first date, even though it wasn't planned that way. At my door, he pulled me close, like he wanted to kiss me again, but was holding back. I'm leaving in the morning for work out of town, he said. Can I take you out when I get back? Looking into his deep brown eyes, I felt myself falling fast. Yes, Brian. I said softly. I'd like that. He exhaled, almost relieved. Good, though I don't like the idea of waiting that long. Then finally he kissed me. Slow, deliberate, leaving me breathless. As I slipped inside, I leaned against the door, heart pounding. This was dangerous, and I wanted more. Driving home, I kept drifting into the next lane. My thoughts were on her. I had it bad. At home, the house felt emptier than ever. More than when Carmen left. I'd never been good at being single. Before Carmen, I'd only been alone for a couple of years, and I hated it. I wasn't the type to pick up women at clubs or date casually. I'd gone straight into my trade after high school, working with my dad until he passed in a construction accident. After that, Mom moved back to Massachusetts and we kept in touch over the phone. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. I used to think of Carmen in moments like this, missing the comfort of someone beside me. But tonight, it was Taylor I couldn't stop thinking about. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The week dragged. Sunday night had been incredible, but then Brian had to leave. We talked a couple of times, but he was exhausted, and our conversations were brief. When I met Jimmy, I thought I knew what love felt like. He made my heart flutter. But Brian, he made my whole body shake. I stayed at my parents' house the night before Brian was due back, knowing he'd be home either late at night or early this morning. By mid-morning, Mom was cooking breakfast. "Honey, can you grab the newspaper?" she asked. "Sure, Mom." I stepped outside, stretching as I walked down the driveway. As I reached the curb, a car turned onto the street, pulling into Brian's driveway. I froze. A young woman stepped out, beautiful, maybe 20. Then she grabbed a suitcase. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just visiting. She was staying. I clenched my jaw, my whole body heating with anger. Of course, men are all the same. Brian strolled out casually, greeted her like it was nothing. She hugged him, kissed him, and he led her inside. I ducked behind a bush, watching like a lunatic. My heart pounded with a mix of fury and hurt. I knew it. I wondered why Taylor was taking so long. Just as I was about to check, she stormed inside, shaking the whole house. "This son of a jerk is a freak," she shouted. I sighed. "What now?" Her face was a storm of rage and heartbreak. The same look she had after Jimmy betrayed her. "What happened, dear?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. I knew it was too good to be true. She crossed her arms. "Taylor, honey, slow down. What are you talking about?" That tramp just pulled into Brian's driveway with a suitcase. She kissed him. Then he took her inside. He's probably with her right now. I fought the urge to laugh. Was she a brunette with shoulder-length hair? I asked. Taylor whipped around, eyes blazing. "Yes. Do you know her?" I smiled. "Oh yes, that's Emma." Her face twisted in confusion. "Who the heck is Emma?" I waited, letting her stew for a moment. "Brian's daughter." Her expression went blank. Then slowly, comically, realization dawned. "So, she's his daughter," she whispered. "Yes, dear." She exhaled, visibly deflating. Her shoulders sagged and her eyes welled with emotion. I smirked. "I'm sure you'll get along just fine." She glared at me. "You could have told me that earlier." I chuckled. "And missed that performance?" "No chance." Taylor groaned, but I set a plate of bacon and eggs in front of her. She stabbed her fork into her food. "I still want to know why he got divorced. What if it was his fault?" "Ask him," I said simply. "Call him. Invite him to dinner. Talk. You think he'll tell me?" "He likes you, Taylor. He told me." Her eyes widened. "He told you?" I just smiled. "Tell me," she demanded. I shook my head. "Not my story to tell. That's between you and him." I had forgotten Emma was coming for the weekend, but I was always happy to see her. As she unpacked in the guest room, I mentioned, "I might be going out tonight." She smirked. "With a girl?" "If I go, then yes, with a woman." "Well done, Dad. It's about darn time." I laughed, shaking my head. She knew. A few minutes later, my phone rang. "Hey, Brian. It's Taylor." Her voice sent a rush of excitement through me. "Hey, I was just about to call you," I admitted. "Been wondering when I'd see you." She hesitated. "Mom wanted to know if you and Emma would come to dinner tonight." I turned to my daughter. "Want to go to Miss Ruth's for dinner?" "Yes. Heck yes. I never say no to Miss Ruth's cooking." I chuckled. "We'll be there. But I was hoping I wouldn't have to wait until dinner to see you." Taylor hesitated again. "This way, you can spend time with Emma. Plus, I have things to do before then." "Okay," I agreed, though I already couldn't wait to see her again. I hung up, heart pounding. I couldn't wait to see Brian. But suddenly, I wanted something new, a fresh start. Even if no one else knew I would. So, I went shopping. I found the dress, sleek, flattering, just enough shape to feel elegant yet classy. A quick stop at the salon at Ulta, and I was ready. By the time I stepped into the shower, I felt different. Emma and I spent the afternoon grabbing dinner and a movie, just passing time. "You fixed her car, paid for everything, and didn't tell her?" she asked. "She knows I fixed it. That's enough." Emma smirked. "She should know what a good guy you are." Later, I picked up wine and flowers. Emma grinned. "You never dress up for Grandma Ruth's." I rolled my eyes. She knew. At 5:56 p.m., we arrived. The door swung open. Taylor was waiting. The moment I saw Brian, my stomach flipped. He handed Mom the wine, introduced Emma, then turned to me, holding out the flowers. Before I could speak, he pulled me into a soft kiss. "You look beautiful," he murmured, brushing a strand of my hair. Warmth spread through me. "I missed you." "I missed you too. Let's step outside," he said, taking my hand. I caught Mom and Emma peeking from the kitchen, grinning like schoolgirls. They approved. We settled into lounge chairs. "How was work?" I asked. "Long, but I'm glad to be back." A pause. Then I finally asked, "Why did you get divorced?" He sighed. "Tell me yours, I'll tell you mine." I nodded. "Carmen left me for another man," he said simply. I frowned. "Why?" "They had history. When his wife died, she suddenly wanted both of us. Asked me to share her. I blinked. She what? Yeah, I said no, so she left." I shook my head. "She gave up a good marriage for that." Brian shrugged. "If she hadn't, I wouldn't be here with you." I softened. "That's a good way of looking at it." "Your turn." I told him everything. Jimmy's affairs, the betrayal. Brian listened, jaw tight. Then he squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Taylor," he said, voice low. "We're not all like that." For the first time in years, I believed those words. "I know," I whispered. "You've shown me." Emma's voice called from inside. "Dinner's ready." Watching Dad with Taylor, I had never seen him like this. With Mom, he had loved. With Taylor, he was alive. Grandma Ruth smiled knowingly. Last weekend, they had their moment. I set the table, stealing glances outside. Dad pulled out Taylor's chair. She smiled at him like he was her person. This felt right. I didn't want to let go of Brian's hand. Miss Ruth had seated us together, and Brian, ever the gentleman, pulled out my chair. Jimmy never did that. "So, Emma," I said, "Mom mentioned you're in college. What are you studying?" "Healthcare management," she said. "I love medicine, but didn't want years of training. This is a better fit." Brian beamed with pride. "That's amazing," I said. "Brian told me you're doing great." She smirked. "Dad talks about you too. A lot." I blushed. Brian just smirked and took another bite. Dinner flew by, Emma subtly making sure I knew how great her dad was. And honestly, it felt good. She thought I was good enough for him. After dinner, Taylor turned to me. "Want to go for a walk?" I smiled. "I'd love to, but your mom has other plans." Miss Ruth waved us off. "Go. We've got cleanup." Taylor grinned. "Looks like we're being kicked out." We walked, fingers entwined, talking about everything. As we neared her parents' house, she tugged my hand. "You know," she said playfully, "I've never seen your house." I raised a brow. "Want to?" She nodded. Without another word, we kept walking past her parents' house toward mine. Inside, I took my time looking around. I'm impressed, I teased. No keg, no posters of women in bikinis. Brian smirked. Oh, those are in the bedroom. I shot him a glare, but when he laughed, I rolled my eyes. You better be kidding. Something shifted in his expression. What is it? He asked. You. I hesitated. You just called me sweetheart. He blinked. I did. I nodded. Sorry, he said quickly. Maybe too soon, but that's how I think of you. I looked at him, warmth flooding my chest. Then I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him. When I pulled back, I whispered, I believe the next room I'd like to see is your bedroom. He didn't hesitate. Wrapped in Brian's arms, everything felt right. Safe. Cherished. As we rested, he kissed my forehead, then surprised me. Baby, how long is left on your lease? I blinked. 2 months. Why? He exhaled. I don't want to spend another night without you. Move in with me. I'll even cover your rent if needed. A slow smile spread across my face. I think I should too. He kissed me again. Stay tonight. Tomorrow we'll start moving your things. Perfect, I murmured. Then I hesitated. But we've been gone a while. We should get back. Agreed, he said. But we definitely need a shower first. We cleaned up, got dressed, and headed back. As we stepped onto the deck, Mom, Dad, and Emma all stared. Sorry we took so long, I said quickly. Lost track of time. Mom smirked. Must have been some walk. You even stopped for a shower. I blushed. Yeah, they knew. Taylor and I married as soon as we could. No big wedding, no reception, just a simple civil ceremony. We had both done the big wedding before. This time, it wasn't about the party. It was about us. Carmen and I never had a real honeymoon, but Taylor and I took a cruise to Jamaica. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Life was good. We settled into a rhythm, just the two of us. Then one afternoon, Taylor came home, slamming the door open. You son of a jerk. I tensed. What did I do? She stormed toward me, eyes flashing. I cannot believe you did this to me. I searched her expression. Was she angry? Excited? Both? Baby, what are you talking about? Her lips twitched. Oh, don't pretend you don't know. I don't know, I protested. She smacked my chest lightly, then grinned. You got me pregnant, you creep. Everything stopped. I blinked. What? 2 months, she confirmed, glowing. Just got back from the doctor. A slow smile spread across my face. Then I scooped her up, spinning her around, laughing. I was ready. For weeks I'd felt off, tired, nauseous, dizzy. My mind jumped to the worst. Brain tumor, some cruel joke from fate. But when my doctor placed a bottle of prenatal vitamins on the table, I froze. Congratulations, she said. You're pregnant. Pregnant. The word echoed in my head. I had always wanted this, a child with a man I loved. And now it was real. I couldn't wait to tell Brian. That night we headed to my parents' house. They'd wanted grandkids for years, and I knew Mom would lose it. So we messed with her first. Mom, Dad, I said, voice serious. Brian and I need to talk. Please sit down. Mom's face dropped. Is everything okay, dear? I sighed dramatically. I just got back from the doctor. Brian here says I have, well, a parasite. Mom gasped. Oh, honey, how serious is it? It'll last months, I said gravely, and I'll gain a lot of weight. Mom clutched my hand. Is there a cure? Brian, barely holding back laughter, shook his head. No cure, just has to run its course. Mom frantically grabbed a notepad. What's the name of this disease? I bit my lip, drawing out the suspense. Pregnancy. She froze, then screamed, sobbing, throwing her arms around us. Dad just sat there, eyes glistening, overwhelmed. They were going to be grandparents. Taylor was 8 months pregnant, more beautiful than ever. Life was perfect. Then my phone rang. I answered. "Hey, Emma, what's up?" Her voice shook. "Dad, can you come to North City Medical now?" My stomach dropped. "What happened?" She hesitated. "It's Mom. She had an accident. It's bad." Relief mixed with irritation. "Look, Emma, I'm glad you're talking to her again, but that doesn't make her my problem. Peter's responsible for her." Silence. Then a whisper. "Dad, Peter is dead. He was in the accident too." My breath caught. My first response, one I'd later regret. "Is that right?" "Well." Emma was quiet. I sighed. "That still doesn't make your mother my problem." "Dad, I know, but she's mine and I need your help." My jaw tightened. "All right, I'm coming, but don't expect me to play husband again." I hung up. Taylor was already grabbing her coat, meeting my gaze. "We're going." I shook my head. "I am. You're staying here." "But." "No buts," I said firmly. "You're not walking into a hospital pregnant." She sighed. "Fine. But keep me updated." I kissed her forehead. "Always." Then I grabbed my keys and left. At the hospital, Emma filled me in. "Mom will recover but needs physical therapy." She broke her arm and leg, but nothing life-threatening. A police officer approached. "Mrs. Hartman won't face charges, but both she and Mr. Hartman were intoxicated. The crash was their fault." I sighed. "What about the other driver?" "No fatalities, but injuries, and a totaled car. The insurance will decide liability." Emma went to see her mother while I processed everything. If Carmen had stayed with me, someone who didn't drink, this might not have happened. But that wasn't my problem anymore. She'd lost her husband and now faced an uncertain future. Emma returned hesitantly. "She wants to see you, Dad. I told her you'd probably say no." For years, I carried resentment. But why? I had a great life, a beautiful wife, and another daughter on the way. Carmen had made her choices, and she was already paying for them. I let it go. "I'll talk to her." When Brian walked in, my throat tightened. "You came," I whispered. "Thank you." He nodded. "How are you feeling?" "I'll recover," I admitted. "But losing Peter, I feel lost." "I heard," he said simply. "I'm sorry." I studied him. "Are you?" He sighed. "At first, no, but I realized I don't want to hold on to bitterness. So yes, I am sorry." Tears welled up. "That means a lot." After a pause, I added, "Emma told me you're having a baby girl. You must be excited." "I am." Looking down, I confessed, "Brian, I regret what I did. I convinced myself Peter was my soulmate, but it was just a marriage, no different from ours." I swallowed hard. "I knew you wouldn't share me. I wanted that to be the reason I left, so I could blame you. But that was selfish. I'm sorry." He met my gaze and nodded. "It's in the past. I forgive you." A relieved breath escaped me. "Friends?" "Definitely." I smiled. "I have to sell a house and find a job. I don't even know where to start." He rested a hand on the bed rail. "Focus on recovery. When you're ready, call me. I'll help." Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you, Brian." After leaving Carmen's room, I spotted Olivia with Emma. I hugged her. "You holding up okay?" "Liv?" "I'm fine, Uncle Brian. Just need help with paperwork." "I've got you." "As we worked," she admitted, "I didn't cut off my dad because of you. I did it because he disrespected my mom's memory." I nodded. "It's over now." When we finished, she smirked. "Well, I'm an orphan now. Want another kid?" I chuckled. "You already are ours, and tonight, you're coming home with us." Time flew. Olivia and Emma both got married. I had the honor of walking them down the aisle. Emma and Michael lived nearby, expecting their first baby. Olivia married fast. Some doubted it, but their love is real. They have 2 kids now who call Taylor and me Grandma and Grandpa. As for Carmen, I helped her find a job. and she eventually married her boss. She resisted for years, but last year she finally said yes. Taylor and I built the family she always dreamed of. We have 4 kids: Samantha, 8, Jasmine, 7, Nathan, 5, and Carmen, 4. After Carmen was born, we knew our family was complete, so I got the procedure. No regrets. Miss Ruth is still with us, though we lost Richard 6 years ago. He lived long enough to meet his grandkids, and we're grateful. We visit Miss Ruth daily. With our family growing, we need space. Soon we'll sell both houses and move into a bigger home together. Looking back, I'd never imagined life would turn out like this, but I wouldn't change a thing. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.